I want to tell you about two people I once heard of a long time ago. Maybe you know folks like them. Maybe you were one of them once standing at a crossroads, not sure which way to turn, hoping somebody might notice you were lost. This happened back in 1882 out in Arizona territory, when the land was still wild and a person could disappear into the dust if they wanted to. Most folks did want to. Back then, running from something or towards something, it was hard to tell the difference. What I am about to share is not a story of gunfights or outlaws. It is quieter than that, harder, maybe. It is about a man who had forgotten how to stay put, and a woman who had forgotten how to ask for help. For those of you who remember when a handshake meant your word was good, when neighbors looked after each other without being asked, when love showed itself through doing rather than saying well. This one is for you. Pull up a chair. I reckon this will take a while. The Red Hawk station sat where the road gave up trying to go anywhere important. Eli Cutter leaned against the hitching post and watched the dust devils spin across the flats. His buckskin mare won in a card game 2 territories back, stood with her head low, saving her strength against the heat. Good horse. That one had more sense than most men he had known. He pulled his hat lower and studied the station. Ordinary enough. A squat adobe building with a hand-painted sign that had seen better decades. A water barrel with a tin dipper hanging from a nail. 3 wooden benches arranged under an overhang that provided the only shade for miles. The afternoon stage was late. Nobody seemed surprised. A heavy-set man in a conductor's vest fanned himself with a schedule board and spat tobacco juice into the dirt. 2 drummers argued about the price of that new barbed wire folks back east were selling. A woman with 3 children tried to keep them from running into the road. Eli had no business here except the business of leaving. South, he figured. Maybe El Paso. Maybe further. It did not matter much. One town bled into another when you had no reason to remember any of them. The air smelled of horse sweat and alkali dust. Flies buzzed lazy circles around the water barrel. Somewhere behind the station, a dog barked twice and went quiet. He was reaching for his canteen when he saw her. She sat on the far bench, the one closest to the corner where the overhang met the wall, alone. Hands folded in her lap around a piece of paper. A calico dress that had been washed so many times the blue flowers had faded to gray suggestions. Button-up boots with dust worked into every seam. None of that held his attention. The bruise did. It spread across her left cheekbone, yellow at the edges where the healing had started, purple-black at the center where it had not. She held herself the way a dog holds itself after a kick, still, watchful, ready to move fast if it came to that. Eli looked away, not his concern. He had learned a long time ago that other people's troubles were exactly that. Other people's. The drummers finished their argument. The mother herded her children toward the station door. The conductor spat again and announced the stage would be another hour. Maybe 2. Eli stayed where he was. He watched a rancher ride in from the north, tie his mule, and disappear inside. Watched a boy carry water buckets to the trough. Watched the shadow of the overhang creep an inch to the east as the sun continued its slow arc. And he watched the woman. She had not moved, had not spoken to anyone, had not bought water or asked about the schedule or done any of the things people did at stagecoach stations. She simply sat with that paper in her hands, and every few minutes she would look up, scanning the faces around her with an expression he could not quite name. Desperation. That was part of it. But there was something else. Something that looked like a decision being made over and over again. The rancher came back out, mounted his mule, rode away without glancing in her direction. She watched him go. Her fingers tightened on the paper. A drummer walked past her bench. She shifted, extended the paper slightly toward him. He did not notice, or pretended not to, and kept walking. Eli's eyes narrowed. The woman waited. Another man passed the conductor this time, heading toward the outhouse behind the station. She lifted the paper again. He walked by without stopping. She lowered it to her lap, smoothed the creases with her thumb. The second drummer approached. This time she stood, stepped into his path, held the paper out with both hands. He stopped, looked at her, looked at the bruise, looked away, muttered something, and sidestepped around her. She sat back down. Eli pushed off from the hitching post. He did not know why, did not know what he planned to say or do, only that his boots were moving across the packed dirt, and his shadow was falling over the bench where she sat. She looked up at him. Brown eyes, lighter than he expected, clear, despite everything. They held on his face without flinching, without pleading, without any of the things he might have anticipated. Just waiting. He stopped 3 feet away, removed his hat, held it against his chest the way his mother had taught him when he was still young enough to listen. "Ma'am." No response, no nod, no greeting, no acknowledgement that he had spoken. "Ma'am, I don't mean to intrude, but—" She shook her head once. Quick, sharp, then pointed to her right ear, pointed to her left, shook her head again. Eli stopped talking. She could not hear him. She watched his face for understanding. When she saw it arrive, something in her shoulders loosened just a fraction, just enough to notice. Then she held out the paper. He reached for it slowly. The way you reach for something you know will change things. The way you reach for a telegram that might carry bad news. The way you reach for a letter from someone who has been gone too long. The paper had been torn from a brown bag, the kind they sold flour in at the general store. The writing was in pencil, pressed hard enough to leave grooves in the surface. 4 words. "Please, help me leave." Eli read them 3 times. He looked at her, at the bruise, at the careful stillness of her hands in her lap, at the way she watched his face for his reaction, the way a person watches weather rolling in over the mountains. He crouched down until his eyes were level with hers. She tensed, but did not pull back. He pointed to the paper, pointed to himself, pointed down the road, south, away from here. She stared at him. He tried again. Pointed to the paper, pointed to her, made a walking motion with 2 fingers, pointed to the road. "Do you want to leave?" She nodded. A single dip of the chin. Her eyes never left his. Eli straightened, looked around the station. The drummers had gone inside. The mother and children were nowhere to be seen. The conductor had not returned from the outhouse. Nobody was watching. Nobody would notice if a drifter and a bruised woman rode out together. Nobody would care. He looked back at her. She had not moved. Still sitting with her hands in her lap, the paper now clutched between his fingers instead of hers. He should walk away. That was the smart thing. The safe thing. The thing that kept a man breathing in territory where minding your own business was the closest thing to religion. She was not his responsibility. He did not owe her anything. He could get on that southbound stage and never think about brown eyes or yellow bruises or notes written on flour sacks for the rest of his days. He looked at the paper again. Please, help me leave. 4 words. Not demanding, not commanding, just asking. Just hoping that one person, any person, might read them and choose to do something other than walk away. Eli folded the paper and put it in his shirt pocket. Then he extended his hand to her. She looked at it, looked at him. Something passed across her face, not quite trust. Not yet, but the possibility of it. The willingness to try. She took his hand and stood. Her palm was rough with work. Calluses on her fingers, a small scar across her thumb. Strong hands, hands that had done more than wring themselves in worry. Eli turned toward the livery across the road. Behind them, the conductor emerged from the outhouse and walked back toward the station. The drummers' voices drifted out through the open window, still arguing about wire and fencing and things that would change the West forever. The dust continued to blow. Nobody called out. Nobody tried to stop them. They walked together across the road, her hands still in his, and the sun beat down on them like a question waiting to be answered. All he knew was that he had read the note, and he had not walked away. Everything else would have to sort itself out from there. If this story brought someone to mind, a neighbor, a friend, someone who once needed help and found it, we would be honored to know where you are reading from today. Sometimes folks become family just by sharing a tale. Eli spoke to her 3 times before he remembered she could not hear him. The first time, outside the livery, asking if she could ride. The second time, inside the dim stable, telling her to wait while he talked to the hostler. The third time, pointing at a roan gelding and saying the price was too high. Each time, she watched his mouth move. Each time. Nothing registered on her face except patience. The hostler, a wiry man with tobacco stains in his beard, wanted $12 for the roan. Eli had 9. He pulled out his pocket watch, the one with his father's initials engraved on the case. A good horse cost $15, $20. The watch was worth more, but he was not in a position to haggle. He set it on the wooden rail between them. The hostler picked it up, turned it over, held it to his ear. Silver, sterling, runs true. A long look. The hostler pocketed the watch and jerked his thumb toward a bay mare in the corner stall. Take that one. She's gentler. Eli led both horses into the yard. The woman stood where he had left her. shoulders pressed against the stable wall, eyes tracking every movement around the station across the road. He touched her elbow. She spun, hands coming up. He stepped back, raised both palms, waited. Her breathing slowed. She lowered her hands, her cheeks flushed red. Eli shook his head once. Nothing to be sorry for. He pointed to the bay mare, pointed to her, made a gesture he hoped meant ride. She approached the horse carefully, reached up to touch the saddle horn. Her fingers traced the worn leather, the stitching, the brass ring where the cinch connected. Learning by touch what she could not ask about with words. Eli laced his fingers together and held them low, offering a step up. She hesitated, looked at him, looked at the horse. Then she put her boot in his hands, and he lifted her into the saddle. She grabbed the horn with both fists. Her knuckles went white. The mare shifted, and the woman's whole body went rigid. Eli mounted the buckskin and brought her alongside, close enough that he could reach out and steady the bay's reins if needed. He looked at the woman. She looked back at him. He pointed down the road, south, away from the station, away from whoever had put that bruise on her face, away from whatever she was running from. She nodded. They rode. The first mile was slow. The woman's hands never relaxed on the saddle horn. Every time the bay stepped over a rock or adjusted her gait, the rider tensed like she expected to fall. Eli watched from the corner of his eye. He had questions, dozens of them, and no way to ask. Who hit you? Where are you from? Who is coming? The words sat useless in his throat. At the creek crossing, he pulled up and dismounted. The horses needed water. The woman needed rest. Her arms were trembling from gripping so hard. He helped her down. She stumbled when her boots hit the ground, and he caught her elbow again. This time she did not flinch. That was something, at least. She walked to the creek's edge and knelt on the bank, cupped water in her hands, brought it to her face, and stopped. The water dripped through her fingers as she stared at her own reflection. At the bruise, her jaw tightened. She splashed the water against her cheek, hard, like she was trying to wash something away that would not come off. Eli crouched a few feet away, busied himself checking the buckskin's hooves, gave her the privacy to have whatever moment she was having. When he looked up again, she was watching him. She pulled a scrap of paper from her dress pocket, the pencil stub she had used for the note. She wrote something, then held it out. Man coming? Tomorrow? Please. He read the words twice. Tomorrow. Whoever she was running from would reach Red Hawk Station by tomorrow, which meant they had until then to put distance between her and whatever waited behind. He found a stick, crouched in the mud at the creek's edge, drew a simple shape, 4 walls, a peaked roof, a chimney. She leaned closer. He pointed to the drawing, pointed to himself, then pointed to her, then pointed to the horizon where the road disappeared into the hills. I have a place. You can stay there. She studied the drawing, studied his face. Her eyes moved back and forth between them, like she was trying to read a language she only half understood. Then she reached down and picked up the stick. Next to his crude house, she drew a second shape, a question mark. Eli looked at the question mark she had drawn in the mud. Why? She wanted to know why he was helping her, why he had stopped when everyone else walked past, why a stranger with nothing to gain would offer a roof to a woman with nothing to give. He did not have an answer, not one he could draw in the mud. Anyway, so he just shrugged, pointed to the horses, pointed to the road. Does it matter? She held his gaze for a long moment. The creek burbled over the rocks behind her. A meadowlark called from somewhere in the tall grass. The smell of wet earth and sage hung thick in the air. Then she erased the question mark with her boot and stood. They mounted and rode on. The land opened up as they left the creek behind. Rolling hills covered with bunch grass and creosote stretched toward mountains that shimmered blue in the distance. The sun hung 3 hands above the western ridge, pouring heat across the flats. Eli kept the pace slow. The woman sat easier in the saddle now, her death grip on the horn relaxing into something that looked almost natural. She watched the landscape pass with the eyes of someone who had not seen open country in a long time. The trail wound through a stand of mesquite, the branches scratching at their legs as they passed. Cicadas droned in the brush. A jackrabbit bolted across the path and disappeared into a wash. He glanced back at her. She was looking at the rabbit's dust trail, a small crease between her eyebrows. Curious, not afraid. Good. They climbed a low ridge and the valley spread out below them. Eli reined up and pointed. His homestead sat at the far end, where the valley narrowed toward a gap in the hills. Small from here. A dark square against the brown and gold of the grassland. Smoke should have been rising from the chimney, but there was none. The place had been cold for 8 months. She pulled her horse alongside his, studied the distant cabin, looked at him. He nodded. That's it. She looked back at the cabin. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. They descended into the valley. The grass grew thicker here, fed by a spring that surfaced somewhere near the gap. The horses' hooves swished through the stems. Grasshoppers leaped away from their path in clicking clouds. The smell changed as they drew closer to the homestead. Dust and dry wood, old hay from the barn, the faint sweetness of the apple tree he had planted 3 years ago. Its branches heavy with fruit nobody had picked. The cabin emerged from the shimmer of distance into solid form. Stone chimney, plank walls weathered gray, a single window facing east to catch the morning light. The glass was dirty, but unbroken. The barn listed slightly to the south, one corner of the foundation settling into the earth. The corral fence had gaps where rails had fallen. The garden beside the cabin had gone wild, tomato vines tangled with weeds. Bean poles collapsed, something that might have been squash sprawling across what had once been neat rows. He had built this place with his own hands. Every board, every nail, every stone in that chimney. 4 years of work, 4 years of believing he might stay somewhere long enough to call it home. Then he had left. The way he always left. Eli dismounted in the yard. The dirt was packed hard, baked by months of sun. His boots raised small puffs of dust with each step. He walked to the woman's horse and offered his hand. She took it, swung down. Her legs wobbled when they took her weight. Hours in the saddle, when you were not used to it, did that. She steadied herself against the mare's flank. He pointed to the cabin door, pointed to her. She looked at the cabin, at the barn, at the wild garden and the leaning fence and all the signs of a place that had been abandoned. Then she looked at him. Her eyes asked the question her voice could not. "This is yours." He nodded. She walked toward the porch, climbed the 2 steps, put her hand on the door latch, looked back at him one more time. He pointed to the cabin, pointed to her, then pointed to the barn, pointed to himself. "You sleep inside. I sleep out here." She tilted her head. Confusion. He mimed sleeping hands pressed together under his cheek, pointed to the cabin, then mimed it again and pointed to the barn. Understanding dawned. Her eyebrows rose. She shook her head, pointed to the cabin, pointed to him. "It is your house." He shook his head right back, pointed to the cabin, pointed to her, crossed his arms. "You are taking the cabin. That is final." She stared at him. He stared back. Something happened at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, more like the memory of one, buried under too much caution to fully emerge. She turned and opened the door, paused on the threshold, looking into the dim interior. Then she stepped inside. Eli stood in the yard and listened to her footsteps on the floorboards, heard her move through the space, the creak of a cabinet door, the scrape of a chair, the thump of something being set down. The sun touched the ridge. The light turned gold, then orange. Shadows stretched across the yard like fingers reaching for the cabin. He walked to the barn, pushed open the door. The smell of old hay and leather and dust rolled over him. His saddle still hung on the rack where he had left it. His tools still lined the workbench. Everything waiting, as if he had only stepped out for a moment instead of running away for 8 months. He unsaddled both horses, led them to the corral, found the pump, and worked the handle until water flowed into the trough. The horses drank deep. When he turned back toward the cabin, a light glowed in the window. She had found the coal oil lamp, had figured out how to light it. The yellow glow pushed back against the gathering dusk. He watched it for a long moment. Then he went back into the barn and made himself a bed in the hay. The night came on slow. Stars emerged one by one. Coyotes began their chorus somewhere in the hills, yips and howls that echoed off the valley walls. The horses shifted in the corral, their breathing settling into the rhythm of sleep. Eli lay on his back and stared at the rafters. Tomorrow, he would need to explain things to her, show her the well, the root cellar, the path to the nearest neighbor, figure out some way to talk that did not require words. Tomorrow, he would need to think about the man who was coming, the one she was running from, the one who had put that bruise on her face. But tonight, there was only the hay beneath him and the star through the gaps in the roof, and the distant glow of lamplight from a cabin that was no longer empty. He closed his eyes. Sleep came slow, broken by dreams he would not remember. And sometime deep in the night, when the moon had risen high enough to cast shadows through the barn slats, he heard something that pulled him back to waking. Footsteps. Not inside the cabin, outside, crossing the yard, coming toward the barn. Eli sat up in the hay, his hand reaching for the knife at his belt. The footsteps stopped outside the barn door. Moonlight came through the gaps in the boards, casting pale stripes across the dirt floor. He could see a shadow through the slats. Small. Still. The door creaked open. She stood in the opening, the lamp in her hand throwing yellow light across her face. She wore the same calico dress, her feet bare on the cold ground. Her eyes found him in the darkness. She held up a tin cup. Steam rose from it. Coffee. Eli let out a breath. Let go of the knife. She walked toward him, careful with the lamp, and held out the cup. He took it. The tin was hot against his palms. The smell cut through the hay and dust, rich, dark, real. He raised it to her in thanks, drank. She watched him for a moment. Then she pointed to herself, pointed to her head, made a gesture he did not understand. She tried again, pointed to her eyes, then covered them with her hand, then pointed to the cabin. She could not sleep. He nodded. He understood that. She sat down in the hay a few feet away from him, set the lamp between them. The flame flickered and steadied. They sat in silence. The coffee warmed his chest. The horses shifted in the corral outside. An owl called from somewhere in the valley. She pulled paper from her pocket, the pencil stub, wrote something and held it out. Thank you. For today? He read it, nodded. She wrote more. I did not think anyone would stop. He took the pencil from her fingers, found a clear space on the paper. Why not? She read his words. Her jaw tightened. She wrote, People do not help women like me. He did not know what that meant. Did not know if she meant deaf or bruised or something else entirely. He chose not to ask. Instead, he wrote, I am not people. She read it. Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile, but the tension around her eyes loosened. She wrote, I can see that. They passed the paper back and forth. Small exchanges, simple things. Where the well was, how to work the pump, that the root cellar held jars of preserves from 2 summers ago that might still be good. The moon rose higher. The lamp burned lower. Finally, she stood, picked up the lamp, looked at him one more time. He pointed to the cabin, pointed to her, made the sleeping gesture. She nodded, turned, walked back across the yard, the lamplight shrinking with each step until the cabin door closed behind her and only the glow in the window remained. Eli lay back in the hay. He did not sleep again that night. Morning came gray and cool. Mist hung in the low places of the valley. The horses stood at the corral fence, waiting to be fed. Eli rose stiff from the hay. His back ached. His neck was sore. He was not as young as he used to be, and the ground was harder than memory had promised. He walked to the cabin. The door was open. The smell of coffee drifted out. She had found the beans he had left behind, had figured out the stove, had made a fresh pot before he was even awake. He stepped inside. The cabin looked different. She had been busy in the hours since dawn. The table was clear of the dust and old newspapers that had accumulated in his absence. The window glass had been wiped clean. A jar of wildflowers sat on the sill, purple and yellow blooms from the meadow behind the barn. She stood at the stove, stirring something in the cast-iron skillet. Eggs. She had found the hen house. Then had gathered what the chickens left behind. She turned when his shadow fell across the floor. Raised one hand in greeting. He nodded back. They ate at the table, facing each other. Eggs and coffee. No bread. The flour had gone to Weevil's months ago. No conversation. She could not hear him, and he did not know how to speak to her. But the silence was not uncomfortable. It sat between them like a third presence, patient and familiar. When the plates were empty, she stood and gathered them, carried them to the basin, began to wash. Eli watched her work, the efficiency of her movements, the way she anticipated what came next: soap before water, rinse before dry. She had done this 10,000 times in some other kitchen, some other life. He rose and walked to the old trunk in the corner, the one he had not opened since he left 8 months ago. Inside, beneath folded clothes and a Bible that had belonged to his mother, he found what he was looking for: a small leather-bound book, the cover worn soft from handling. Gold letters stamped on the spine, faded but legible manual alphabet for the deaf and dumb. Published 1870. His mother had bought it years ago. When a deaf boy worked on their farm back in Kansas, Eli had learned a few signs then, forgotten most of them since. He carried the book back to the table and set it between them. She turned from the basin, saw the book. Her eyes widened. He opened to the first page. Diagrams of hand positions, letters of the alphabet formed in fingers and palms. He pointed to the book, pointed to himself, made a clumsy attempt at the letter A. Wrong. He could tell by the way her mouth twitched. She crossed to the table. Her fingers touched his hand, adjusted the position of his thumb, guided his fingers into the correct shape. Her skin was warm, rougher than he expected, strong. She released his hand and made the sign herself, perfect, clean. Then she pointed to him, made a gesture that said, "Try again." He tried again, closer this time. She nodded. They sat at the table as the morning stretched toward noon. The alphabet came slow. His hands cramped. His fingers ached from the unnatural positions. Reminded him of learning to write as a boy, the way his hand had cramped around the pencil while his mother stood patient beside him. But each time he got a letter right, something shifted in her face. A softening, a brightening, a crack in the armor she wore. By midday, he could spell his name. Eli. She watched him form each letter. Then she raised her own hands and spelled something back. Lila, Lila. He had not known her name until this moment. She had been the woman in his mind, a problem to solve, a person to help. Now she was Lila. He pointed to her, pointed to the letters she had just formed. Nodded. Lila. She nodded back. And this time, the crack in her armor widened into something real. A smile, small, brief, gone as quickly as it came, but real. Eli closed the book, stood, walked to the door, and looked out at the road. Empty. The afternoon sun hammered down on the flats. No dust clouds, no riders, not yet. He turned back to Lila. She had risen too, standing by the table with her hands clasped in front of her. He crossed to the door that led to the small back room, the one he had built as a storeroom but never used. He pushed it open and stepped aside so she could see. A narrow bed frame with a corn husk mattress, a window that faced the garden, a hook on the wall for hanging clothes, nothing else. He pointed to the room, pointed to her. Yours. She stepped past him and stood in the doorway. Her hand rose to touch the window frame. The glass was dirty, but light still poured through. She turned to look at him. Her eyes glistened. She raised her hands, formed letters slowly. W-H-Y. The same question from the creek. He thought about it, thought about the note in his pocket, thought about 20 years of running, thought about her eyes at the station when she held that paper out to men who would not stop. He raised his hands, formed letters of his own, B-E-C-A-U-S-E. She waited. Y-O-U-A-S-K-E-D, because you asked. She read the letters. Her chin trembled. She pressed her lips together hard. Then she stepped forward and took his hand. Held it for a moment. Squeezed once. Let go. She walked into her room and closed the door. Eli stood in the hallway, looking at the wood grain. His hand was still warm where she had touched it. He walked outside, stood on the porch, looked at the road that stretched empty toward the horizon. Tomorrow. That was what she had written. The man was coming tomorrow. But tomorrow had already become today. And somewhere beyond that empty horizon, dust was beginning to rise. The morning lesson began with a mistake. Eli tried to sign, "Thank you." His hand moved from his chin outward. The motion he thought he remembered from the book. Simple. Direct. Lila's face changed. Her eyes widened. Her mouth pressed into a line that fought against itself. Then she laughed. No sound came out, but her shoulders shook. Her hand covered her mouth. She doubled over. The force of it bending her whole body forward. Eli froze. His hand hung in the air, still holding the wrong shape. She straightened, wiped her eyes, reached for the paper and pencil. "You just signed toilet?" He stared at the words, looked at his hand, looked at her. She demonstrated the correct sign. Hand flat against chin, moving forward and down. "Thank you." Then she showed him what he had done, the subtle difference in finger position that turned gratitude into something else entirely. He tried the correct version. Got it right this time. She nodded approval, but her eyes still sparkled with the memory of his error. Eli felt heat climb his neck, but something else too. Something lighter. Her laugh made no sound, but it filled the room anyway. The way light fills a room, you cannot hear it, but you know it is there. He made the sign again. "Thank you." Pointed to her. She tilted her head. "For what?" He gestured around the cabin. The clean floors, the mended shirt he wore, she had found it yesterday. Stitched the fraying collar while he worked on the corral fence. The wildflowers on the table, replaced fresh this morning. She shook her head, made a sign he did not know. He raised his eyebrows. "Question?" She found the paper, Small thing. He took the pencil, not small to me. She read the words. Her hand rose to her chest, pressed flat against her heart for a moment. Then she turned the page in the book and pointed to the next lesson. They worked through the morning. New signs accumulated. Morning, night, food, work, tired. The vocabulary of daily life. She taught him how signs flowed together, how the face carried meaning as much as the hands, how a raised eyebrow turned a statement into a question, how speed and emphasis changed everything. His hands grew more confident. The shapes came easier now. He could feel the language settling into his muscles, becoming part of how he moved. By midday, they had covered 2 more pages. Lila closed the book and stood, stretched her back, walked to the window and looked out at the garden. Eli watched her profile against the light. The bruise had faded more overnight, yellow now, mostly. The purple, almost gone, in a few more days. There would be no visible mark. She turned, caught him watching, did not look away. Something passed between them. The air in the cabin felt suddenly thicker, warmer. She raised her hands, signed slowly, deliberately. He recognized the words. You, good, student. He signed back. You, good, teacher. She smiled. Not the almost smile he had seen before, a real one, full, the kind that changed her whole face. He smiled back. The moment stretched. Neither moved. Then she dropped her gaze, turned to the stove, began preparing the midday meal. Eli let out a breath he had not known he was holding. They ate beans and cornbread she had made from supplies in the cellar. She had soaked the beans overnight, had mixed the cornmeal with water and salt, and cooked it in the cast-iron skillet until it came out golden. He ate 3 pieces, could have eaten more. She watched him with something like satisfaction, the pleasure of feeding someone who was hungry. He remembered that look from his mother's face, years ago, in a kitchen far from here. When the meal ended, she pulled out the paper again. Tell me about this place. He looked around the cabin. Where to start? He took the pencil, built it 4 years ago. Thought I would stay. She wrote, what changed? He stared at the question, got restless. That happens sometimes. She read it. Her eyes said she knew there was more, but she did not push. Instead, she wrote, it is a good place. Solid. Safe. He wrote, it can be yours, as long as you need. She read the words 3 times. Then she wrote, why do you help me? The question again. He thought about it. The pencil hovered over the paper. Because you did not give up. Because you kept holding out that note, even when everyone walked past. Because you believed someone would stop. She read slowly. Her throat moved. She wrote, I almost stopped believing. You were the last one I would try. The last one. If he had not approached her, if he had gotten on that southbound stage, if he had minded his own business, she would still be there, or worse. He wrote, then I am glad I was not too late. She looked at the words for a long time. When she raised her eyes, they were wet. She did not write anything else, just reached across the table and touched his hand. Her fingers rested on his knuckles, warm, light. He turned his palm up, let her fingers settle into the cup of his hand. She did not pull away. They sat like that for a breath. 2 breaths. The afternoon light slanted through the window and fell across the table between them. Then she withdrew her hand, stood, carried the dishes to the basin. He watched her go. His palm still felt warm. She washed the dishes. He dried them. They worked side by side without speaking, without signing. When the last plate was put away, she turned to face him. She raised her hands, signed something new. 4 signs, slow, deliberate. He recognized only fragments. The first sign pointed to herself, then a gesture toward him, then 2 more movements he could not interpret. He shook his head, did not understand. She signed them again. Slower. He reached for the paper, held it out. She took the pencil, paused. Her hand trembled slightly. Then she wrote, "I said I am glad I found you." Eli read the words, read them again, found him, not the other way around. He had thought he was the one who found her, the one who stopped, the one who chose. But she had found him too, had seen something in his face that made her hold out the note one last time. He wanted to write something back, something that matched what she had given. But before he could find the words, he saw it through the window. Movement on the road. A dust cloud rising against the afternoon sky. Lila could not hear his sharp intake of breath, but she saw his face change, saw him turn toward the window. She grabbed his arm. Her fingers dug into his sleeve. He signed the only word that mattered. Someone. Coming. Her face went pale. Eli moved to the window, looked out across the yard, past the corral, toward the road. Not 1 rider. 2. Eli watched the riders come. His hand moved to his hip where the Colt should have been. It was not there. He had left it in the barn, wrapped in oilcloth, buried under the hay where he slept. 30 yards away, too far. Lila stood behind him. He could feel her trembling through the floorboards. The riders drew closer. Details emerged from the dust and shimmer. The first was an old man, white beard, stooped shoulders, riding a mule that looked as ancient as its owner. He wore a battered hat and a coat too heavy for the weather. Emmett Harlow, the rancher who lived 3 miles north. The second rider was a boy, 14, maybe 15, Emmett's grandson, if memory served. Not Silas. Eli let out a breath, turned to Lila. He signed safe, then spelled Emmett. She did not understand the name, but she understood safe. The grip on his arm loosened. Color crept back into her cheeks. Eli stepped onto the porch. Emmett had already dismounted. He stood in the yard, one hand shading his eyes, looking at the cabin like he was seeing a ghost. "Eli Cutter!" His voice came out rough, like a gate that needed oiling. "Heard you was back. Didn't believe it." Eli descended the steps. "Mr. Harlow, been 8 months. Son, Thought you'd gone for good. Thought so too. Emmett looked past him toward the cabin door. His eyes narrowed. Got company? I do. Woman? Yes. Emmett's face shifted, something clicking into place behind those weathered eyes. Heard something at the station yesterday. He spat in the dirt. Man came through asking questions. City fella, bowler hat, fancy boots that never seen mud before this week. Asking about a deaf woman. Said she was family. Said she'd wandered off. Asked if anyone had seen her. Eli's stomach tightened. What did you tell him? Told him I hadn't seen nobody. Emmett spat again. Didn't like his eyes. Something wrong in there? Something mean? The boy had dismounted too. He stood by the mule, holding both sets of reins, watching the adults talk with the quiet patience of youth raised to stay out of grown folks' business. He's still at the station, Eli asked. Was this morning, booked a room at the boarding house, told Mrs. Pike he'd be staying until he found what he was looking for. Until he found what he was looking for. Silas was not coming tomorrow. He was already here, 10 miles away, sleeping in a rented bed, asking questions that would eventually lead him to this valley. The cabin door opened behind him. Lila stepped onto the porch. She wore the brown dress, her hair pinned back, her face carefully composed. She looked at Emmett, at the bruise still fading on her cheekbone, her chin lifted. Emmett studied her for a long moment. His jaw tightened. That what he did? He asked quietly. The city fella. Eli nodded. Brother-in-law. She say, that's what she wrote me. Emmett was silent. His eyes stayed on Lila. She met his gaze without flinching, without looking away. My wife was deaf, he said finally. 43 years married, lost her hearing to fever when she was 7 years old. Never heard my voice once in all that time. Eli had not known that. Had never thought to ask. In the brief months they had been neighbors before he left. She could read lips some, Emmett continued. Could write well enough. But the signs, the hand talking, that's how we really spoke. Learned it together when we were courting. She taught me and I taught myself, and somehow we made a language that was just ours. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out an envelope, came by to bring the mail. Stage dropped it at my place since nobody was here to receive. But I also came to tell you about that man. Figured you ought to know. Eli took the envelope. A letter from somewhere back east. Return address he did not recognize. One more thing, Emmett said. He raised his hands. The movements were slow, the shapes rusty from years without practice. Help? You need. I come. Eli stared. The old man's fingers held the signs with the confidence of long memory. On the porch, Lila's hand rose to her chest. She signed back. Thank you. Emmett nodded. Then he turned and walked to his mule. The boy helped him mount. Neither of them looked back as they rode out of the yard, heading north toward their own place. Eli watched until the dust settled behind them. He turned to Lila. She stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself. Her face had gone pale again. He climbed the steps, stood before her, made the sign slowly. Man, station, 10 miles. She nodded. She had understood enough from watching. He continued, "Not here, not yet." Her eyes searched his face, looking for something. Reassurance, maybe? A promise he was not certain he could keep. He signed. "Safe. Here. Now." She shook her head. Her hands moved. "He will find me." Eli did not have an answer for that, because she was right. A man who traveled this far, who booked a room, who asked questions at every stop, that man would not give up easily. He reached for her hand. She let him take it. They stood on the porch together, looking out at the empty road. She could run again, just take the bay mare, head south, disappear into the territory. But Silas had found her once. He would find her again. She could hide, stay in the cabin, stay out of sight, wait for him to give up and leave. But men like Silas did not give up. Not when they believed they had the law behind them. There was a third choice. The one Eli did not want to think about yet. Lila squeezed his hand. He looked down at her. She signed. "Inside. Talk." He nodded. They went in. She made coffee. He sat at the table and turned the envelope over in his hands without opening it. The afternoon light shifted. Shadows lengthened across the floor. Outside, a hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. Lila brought 2 cups to the table, sat across from him. She did not ask about the letter, did not ask about Emmett, did not ask about anything, but her eyes stayed on his face, waiting. Eli opened the envelope, pulled out a single sheet of paper, read it once, read it twice. His hands went cold. The letter was from a lawyer in Kansas City, brief, formal, informing him that his father's estate had finally cleared probate, that a small sum remained after debts, that he needed to sign documents within 30 days. But that was not what made his hands go cold. The letter was addressed to Eli Cutter, care of Emmett Harlow, Red Hawk Station, Arizona Territory. Someone back east knew exactly where he was. If a lawyer in Kansas City could find him, so could anyone else. Lila watched his face change. She reached across the table, touched his hand. He looked at her questioning eyes. He thought about Silas, 10 miles away. He thought about the lawyer who knew his location. He thought about how small the world had become. Running was no longer just her problem. It was his too. The sun dropped behind the ridge and the cabin went dark. Eli lit the coal oil lamp. The flame caught, steadied, threw long shadows against the walls. Lila sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold. Neither of them had eaten since Emmett left. He pulled the paper and pencil toward him. "We need to talk about tomorrow." She read the words, took the pencil. "I know. Silas is 10 miles away. He will come." She wrote nothing, just nodded. "What do you want to do?" She stared at the question. Her hand hovered over the paper. The pencil trembled between her fingers. "I do not know." Eli took the pencil back. "You could leave, take the bay mare, ride south, start over." She shook her head before he finished writing. "He will find me. He always finds me." "Then stay. Face him here." Her hand pressed flat against the table. Her knuckles went white. And then, what? "He has papers. He has the law. What can I do against that?" Eli did not have an answer. A judge had signed those documents in the eyes of any court. Silas had every right to take her back. He wrote, "The law is not always right." She laughed. No sound, but her shoulders shook. Her face twisted into something bitter. The law does not care about right. The law cares about property. And I am property now. She shoved the paper away, stood, walked to the window, and pressed her forehead against the glass. Eli watched her back, the rigid line of her spine, the way her hands clenched at her sides. He rose, crossed the room, stood behind her, close but not touching. She could not hear him approach, but she saw his reflection in the glass. He raised his hand, touched her shoulder. She spun. Her palm struck his chest. Hard. He stumbled back, caught himself on the table edge. She signed fast, too fast for him to follow. Her face contorted. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She shoved him again, both hands. He hit the door frame. She signed more, pointed to herself, pointed to him, made a slashing motion across her throat. "If I stay, you die. If I stay, you die." She pushed past him, threw open the door, ran into the yard. Eli followed. The night air was cool. Stars spread thick across the sky. She ran toward the corral, her bare feet slapping the hard-packed dirt. He caught up to her near the water trough, grabbed her arm. She whirled, swung at him. Her fist caught his jaw. Pain exploded through his skull. He did not let go. She hit him again. His lip split. He tasted copper. She tried to pull away. He held on. She kicked at his shins, connected. He grunted, but did not release her. She collapsed. Her knees buckled, and she went down, dragging him with her. They landed in the mud beside the trough. The overflow from the afternoon watering had turned the ground to black muck. She lay there, chest heaving, covered in filth. Her dress was ruined. Her hair had come loose, plastered to her face with mud and tears. Eli sat beside her. His jaw throbbed. His lip dripped blood onto his shirt. Mud soaked through his trousers, cold against his skin. The smell of manure and old rain filled his nostrils. She would not look at him. Her hands came up, signed slowly. "I bring trouble to you. I not worth this." He watched her hands, watched her face, watched the shame burning in her eyes, the humiliation of being reduced to this, lying in the mud like an animal. Having struck a man who had shown her only kindness, he raised his own hands, signed the only thing he could. "You decide." She stared at him. "You choose." Her face crumpled. "I stand with you. Whatever you decide." She turned away, pressed her face into the mud. Her shoulders shook with sobs he could not hear. Eli did not try to comfort her, did not try to lift her up, did not do anything except sit beside her in the muck and wait. The minutes passed. The coyotes began their chorus in the hills. The stars wheeled overhead. Finally, She pushed herself up, sat back on her heels, looked at him. Mud covered her face. Her dress was black with it. She looked like something dragged from a grave. She reached out, touched his split lip. Her fingers came away red. She signed, "Sorry." He shook his head. Signed back, "No. Sorry." She almost smiled. Almost. She signed one word. "Stay." He signed it back. "Stay." They knelt together in the mud. Two people who had run out of places to run. She took his hand. Her fingers laced through his. Mud and warmth and something else. Something that said they were done running. He helped her stand. She helped him stand. They looked at each other in the starlight. Both of them filthy. Both of them exhausted. They walked back to the cabin. Stood on the porch. He drew water from the well. Brought it in a bucket. Found clean cloths. She washed the mud from her face and from her hands, from her arms. He washed the blood from his lip, the mud from his jaw. They worked in silence. The lamp flickered. When they were clean, she signed slowly. "If I leave tomorrow," she paused, "I want you to know." Another pause. Her hand trembled. "You gave it me back. My voice." Eli's chest tightened. His throat closed. He did not know the signs for what he felt. So he took her hand, raised it to his lips, pressed a kiss against her knuckles. She inhaled sharply. He lowered her hand, did not let go. They stood on the porch, holding hands in the dark. She squeezed his fingers. Then she let go, stepped back. Sleep. Now. Tomorrow. Fight. She turned and walked into the cabin, paused at the door to her room, looked back. Her hand made one final sign, safe. Then she went inside and closed the door. Eli stood alone. His jaw ached. His lip throbbed. He walked to the barn, found the oilcloth bundle in the corner, unwrapped his Colt. He checked the cylinder, 6 rounds, all loaded. He tucked the gun into his belt. Tomorrow, Silas would come. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, he bowed his head, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he prayed, "Lord, I do not know what is right, but help me protect her. Help me do what is good." He opened his eyes. Through the barn slats, he could see the cabin. A candle burned in her window. He watched until it went out. Then he lay down in the hay and stared at the ceiling. Sleep did not come, but somewhere past midnight, when the moon had risen high, he heard something that brought him fully awake. Hoofbeats. Not distant this time. Close. Coming up the valley road. Eli rolled out of the hay and grabbed the Colt. The hoofbeats stopped somewhere near the corral. One horse, one rider. He moved to the barn door, peered through the gap between the boards. Moonlight washed the yard silver and black. A figure sat motionless on horseback near the fence, watching the cabin. Eli eased the door open, stepped into the night. The Colt hung at his side, finger off the trigger. "That's far enough." The figure turned. A man's voice came back, thin and reedy. I'm looking for someone. Nobody here but me. I think we both know that's not true. Mr. Cutter, Eli's grip tightened on the pistol. You know my name. I know a great many things. The rider dismounted, tied his horse to the corral fence, walked forward until the moonlight caught his face. Small man, narrow shoulders, a bowler hat that looked ridiculous out here in the territory. Boots that had never seen honest work. Eyes that glittered like a snake's in the pale light. Silas. My sister-in-law is in that cabin, Silas said. I've come to take her home. She's sleeping. Then wake her. No, Silas smiled. The expression did not touch his eyes. Mr. Cutter, I have documents, legal documents, signed by a judge in Missouri, granting me guardianship over Mrs. Brennan, who is unable to care for herself due to her affliction. Her affliction. She's deaf. Surely you noticed. She cannot function in society without supervision. The court recognized this. The court, my cousin, Judge Warren Polk, a fair man, a just man. Silas pulled a folded paper from his coat. It's all here, legal, binding. She belongs under my care. Eli did not move. What happened to her husband's farm? Silas's smile flickered. Sold. To pay debts. And the money used for her care. All of it. I don't have to explain myself to a drifter squatting in a shack. Silas's voice hardened. The woman is my responsibility. My property. Under the law. If you interfere, you'll be arrested. Jailed. Maybe worse. The cabin door opened. Lila stepped onto the porch. She wore the brown dress. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. Her face was calm, composed, revealing nothing. She looked at Silas, looked at him the way you look at something dead on the road. Silas's face changed. The false warmth drained away. Something harder emerged. Lila! He said her name like he was calling a dog. You've caused considerable trouble. Do you have any idea what it cost to track you across 3 territories? She did not respond. Could not hear him. Look at me when I'm speaking. She looked. Her chin lifted. Silas turned to Eli. You see defiance, ingratitude. I took her in after my brother died, fed her, housed her, and this is how she repays me. Eli's hand stayed on the Colt. She had a home. Your brother's home? My brother is dead, and you took everything that was his. Silas's jaw clenched. I am her guardian. The law. The law can be wrong. The law is the law. Mr. Cutter, step aside. Eli did not move. Silas's hand drifted toward his coat. I didn't want trouble, but I came prepared for it. Eli raised the Colt, leveled it at Silas's chest. I wouldn't. Silas froze. His hand hovered near his lapel. Take your hand away from your coat. Slow. Silas obeyed. His face had gone pale in the moonlight. Eli looked at Lila. She stood on the porch, watching them both. He stepped aside, lowered the gun, signed to her, Your choice. She stared at him. I stand with you either way. Silas watched the exchange. His lip curled. What is this? Some kind of trick? She can't understand you. She's deaf and dumb. Lila walked down the porch steps. She crossed the yard, stood 3 feet from Silas. She signed, slow, deliberate. Eli recognized fragments. Brother, good man, you, not. Silas stared at her hands. His face twisted. Stop that. Stop that nonsense. She signed more. Thomas loved me, you, no, this, wrong. I said stop. She did not stop. Farm was his money, was his, you stole. Silas grabbed her wrist. Enough. Eli raised the Colt again. Lila did not look at him, did not call for help. She looked at Silas, looked into his eyes, and she pointed at his face, at the place where something had broken. She signed one word, made it large, made it clear. Ashamed. Silas's grip loosened. She signed again. You, no, what? You? He let go of her wrist, stepped back. His face had crumpled. The hardness was gone. The cruelty was gone. What remained looked old, tired, broken. Thomas was always better than me. His voice came out hoarse. Everyone knew it. Our father, our mother, everyone in town. Thomas, the good son. Silas, the disappointment. Lila watched him. Her hands were still. When he married you, I thought finally, something I could have that he wanted. Silas's voice cracked. But you loved him, really loved him. And he loved you. And I had nothing. The guardianship papers hung limp in his hand. When he died, I saw a chance. The farm, the money, you. He looked at the ground. I told myself I deserved it. After all those years of being second, I told myself you owed me. Lila signed, slow, careful. I owed you nothing. I know. Silas's voice was barely a whisper. I know. He looked at the papers in his hand, looked at them for a long moment. Then he tore them in half. The sound was loud in the stillness. Paper ripping. He dropped the pieces in the dirt. I'll go back to Missouri. Tell the court you died. Fever. Something. He could not meet her eyes. You'll be free. Legally free. Lila stared at him. He turned, walked to his horse, put his foot in the stirrup. Silas. He stopped, looked back. Eli had spoken. His voice was quiet. Why? Silas's face twisted. Because she's right. I know what I am, and I'm tired of being it. He mounted, sat for a moment, looking at the cabin, at Lila, at the life he had tried to steal. Thomas would have hated me for this. He probably already does. He turned his horse toward the road. I'm sorry. The words came out broken. For whatever that's worth. He rode away. The hoofbeats faded into the night. Eli watched until the sound was gone. He turned to Lila. She stood in the yard, arms wrapped around herself, Her face was wet with tears. He walked to her, took both her hands in his. She looked up at him. He signed one word. Free. She signed it back. Free. She collapsed against him. Her forehead pressed against his chest. Her shoulders shook. He held her, felt the trembling, slowly still. The stars wheeled overhead. The horses shifted in the corral. Somewhere in the hills, a coyote called. She pulled back, looked up at him. Her hands rose. Signed something new. What? Now. Eli looked at her face in the moonlight, at the woman who had fought for her freedom, who had faced her tormentor, who had won not with violence, but with truth. He signed back. Tomorrow, we decide. She nodded, squeezed his hands, but her eyes asked a different question, one her hands did not form. What are we now? What do we become? He did not have an answer. Not yet. The days settled into a rhythm. Eli woke each morning to the smell of coffee drifting from the cabin. He would cross the yard in the gray light, his boots leaving tracks in the dew-wet grass, and find Lila on the porch with 2 cups waiting. They would sit together and watch the sun climb over the ridge. No signs, no writing, just the warmth of tin cups in their hands and the silence that had become its own language between them. The bruise on her face faded completely. The yellow shadow disappeared, leaving only smooth skin. But she still flinched sometimes when he moved too fast, when a shadow fell wrong. Old habits, carved deep, he learned to announce himself. A knock on the doorframe, a tap on the wall, vibrations she could feel before he appeared. Emmett came by on the 3rd day after Silas left. His mule picked its way up the valley road in the late morning heat. He brought news. Silas had boarded the eastbound stage the day before, had not spoken to anyone, had left no forwarding address. Gone. Lila signed, "Thank you to the old man." Her hands moved with a grace that still surprised Eli. Emmett signed back. His fingers were surer now, the rust wearing off with each visit. Welcome. Good. See. You. Safe. He stayed for coffee, talked about his wife, how they had built 43 years together without her ever hearing his voice, how the silence between them had held more than most people's conversations. Love don't need ears, Emmett said, looking at Lila. It needs patience and showing up. Every single day, Eli listened, watched Lila's face as Emmett's hands moved. She was hungry for this, for someone who understood, for proof that the life she lived was not lesser. When Emmett left, she stood on the porch and watched him go. Then she turned to Eli. Her hands moved. What? Now. He had been thinking about that, turning it over through sleepless nights. He signed back, "Stay." She tilted her head, waiting. You. Stay. Here. If. You. Want. She watched his hands. This. Your. Home. Now. She shook her head. Your. Home. She pointed at him. Not. Mine. He understood. She did not want charity, did not want to be a guest. He reached for the paper on the table, then let us make it ours. She read the words. Read them again. He wrote more. I do not know what this is, what we are, but I want you here, not as someone I helped, as someone who belongs. She took the pencil. I am afraid. So am I. What if it does not work? What if it does? She set the pencil down. Her hand rose to her chest. She signed the words she had taught him at the creek. Safe. Then another word. Together. Then a third sign. Her hand moving from her chest outward. Palm up. The sign he had not understood until now. The one she made when she mended his shirts. When she set flowers on the table. When she sat beside him, watching the empty road. He knew what it meant. He did not sign it back. Not yet. He was not ready. Instead, he stood, walked to the old trunk, found what he was looking for. A small box, velvet worn thin, the clasp tarnished, his mother's ring. The one his father had given her the year before Eli was born. A simple gold band with a small sapphire. She had worn it every day of her life. For someone worth staying for. She had written in her will, when you find her. He carried it back to the table, set it before Lila. She looked at it, looked at him. He opened the lid. Her breath caught. He signed, slow, careful, only if you want, only when ready. She reached for the ring. Her hand trembled. She did not put it on her left hand. That would be too fast. Instead, she slipped it onto her right hand, the fourth finger, a promise that was not quite a promise, a maybe that leaned toward yes. She looked at it. The sapphire caught the light. She signed one word. Beautiful. He signed back. You. Her eyes glistened. She stood, crossed to him, took his hands. No signs. No writing. Just warmth. He thought about the road that had brought him here, the note on the flour sack, the woman who had held it out until someone stopped. He thought about the years of running, the belief that home was something other people had. He had been wrong. Lila squeezed his hands, looked up at him. She signed. Porch. Chairs. He did not understand. She pointed to the single rocking chair outside, the one he had built years ago. 2. They needed another chair. He thought about the lumber in the barn, the tools he had not touched in months. Today? She nodded. They walked to the barn together. He found the boards, the nails, the saw. She held pieces steady while he cut, handed him tools, swept sawdust from the workspace. The chair took shape through the afternoon, pine boards joined with pegs and nails, a curved back, rockers that matched the old chair's angle. When it was finished, he carried it to the porch, set it beside the first, 2 chairs, side by side. The way his parents' chairs had sat on their porch back in Kansas, the way his grandparents' chairs had sat before that, some things passed down without words. Lila sat in the new one, ran her hands along the armrests. Eli sat in the old one. They looked out at the yard, the corral, the garden showing green shoots. She reached across the space between them, found his hand. The sun dropped toward the ridge. The sky turned orange, then pink. 2 cups of coffee sat on the railing. 2 chairs rocked in gentle rhythm. Her hand was warm in his. The ring glinted in the fading light. Somewhere in his chest, in the place that had been empty for 20 years, something had taken root. He did not have a name for it yet, but he knew what it felt like. It felt like staying. There is something quiet in the chest after a story like this. A tender weight that does not ask to be named or explained. Perhaps it feels like sitting on a porch at evening time, watching the light go soft, holding someone's hand without needing to say why. Many of us have known what it is to be passed by, to hold out something fragile, a look, a word, a silent hope, and watch the world keep moving. Some of us have been the ones who almost kept walking, and some of us, perhaps, have been both. It is all right if this story stirred something that has not settled yet. Some things are meant to stay open, like a window left cracked for the night air. The ache does not need fixing. The quiet does not need filling. It is allowed to simply rest. Thank you for staying until the last word. Thank you for listening.